Salute, this is Jeff.
And this is Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Jeff.
Welcome to the Jeff and David Show. Now with Greg.
100% more Greg.
We are talking about CrossCode, which is a video game that I'm recommending because it's great and playing it is great, and I love the characters and the design, and it makes me warm and fuzzy, and I want more people to know about it and play it. That's basically my idea.
It's a big, fuzzy, furry hug in old 16-bit RPG wonderness.
There's been a lot of retro RPGs, as you might imagine, that have come out recently. Not just RPGs, but just games in general. It's a style. You might say oversaturated, but
16 bits is a lot of bits.
It's a lot of bits. Twice as many as the most popular genre of retro-looking sort of indie games. But what I would say generally sets this one apart is that it's not directly cribbing from an old game. It's just in a style of it. I broadly compared this to something that I played recently, like Time Spinner or Chasm, which are pretty much just, hey, we played Symphony of the Night and we really liked it, so here's like a slavish recreation of like the physics and the menus and the sounds of Symphony of the Night. And I like Symphony of the Night. It's a really great game.
Who doesn't love Symphony of the Night?
It's good stuff. But then also, if you go through all the trouble of making your own video game, why not make something else, something slightly different?
And they've done that, I think. Oh, yes.
So the general premise of CrossCode is that it's a game in a game.
It's a pseudo MMO, right?
Pseudo MMO. It's a single player game, but you're playing characters that are themselves characters in you're playing characters that are characters in the game that have avatars in an MMO, which you're also playing.
So there are NPCs that are NPCs, but there are also NPCs that are player characters, and then there's a player character. There's
layers. There's layers. The main character cannot speak, which I appreciate their justification for it. Is that the speech module is broken. So it's not that she can't speak. That is to say, she has the ability to understand and form words. It's more of an aphasia.
It's the silent protagonist, I think, done better than I've seen in a very long time. And it's all because of stupid facial animations. This game has amazing facial animations.
They're so good. It's so adorable. I love every reaction for the main character, the party members. We'll see actually plenty of them in this little stretch of video here. It's so good. There's lots of surprise and worry and shock and concern and disdain, and it's all in the little sprite portraits. It's very good. The artists have done a very good job.
And to be clear, the character can speak. You pick up a couple of very select words that are used to very strong effect throughout the game. Hi being the most common one.
Also bye, very useful. Why, how. At this point in the game, we've learned why and how. They're being hard-coded into her speech routine, so to speak. It's a joke!
Oh, God.
I mean, it was intentional. There's Emily. Emily is French, and she is also adorable. She is very excited about laser bridges, which might come up later. In the story of the game within the game, which is called Cross Worlds, that's the sort of pseudo MMO. We're looking for, in a classic Zelda style, going to 4 elemental temples, getting the trinkets, learning about the things. The story on top of that is Leah, the one on the right there, our main character, who
blue hair.
Yes, blue hair, can't speak because of issues, and is trying to figure out why she doesn't have her memory. Of course, there's a meta plot on top of that. So which deals with not just the game story, but also the people that made the game, that are working on the game. The actual environment is very interesting because it's not like a virtual reality. It's more of an augmented reality kind of game.
Sort of a Westworld thing going on, but with more augmented thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of thing. I wish they'd explored that a little more. There's hints and bits of it that come through that say some of this is real, some of this is virtual. Which bits are which is left to your imagination.
Yeah, and it's actually, yeah, I was hoping that maybe they'd go into it more, because they talk about the, what is the term they use? Instant matter.
Mm-hmm.
So instant matter is basically their MacGuffin for what the virtual things are made of. Like, the actual game world itself is on a moon. We're doing a fade out here because there's plot revelations, but you can just play the game and you can get the plots. The plot, the second layer plot revelations. The first layer of the plot, which is the game in the game, which we're doing right now, is just doing a simple fetch quest of go to cave with party members and fight monster in cave in order to get the sacred orb, which the characters also comment as being kind of a lame MacGuffin, but you have to do it in order to get to the next big temple. The temples are, the big thing that you want to get to.
They're the big dungeons, the major milestones. There's 4 of them because there are always 4 of them.
Mm-hmm. That's how many elements there are. That's how many directions there are. That's how many fingers you have. It just makes sense. If you put it all together, it just makes sense. But yes, about the instant matter. So the actual game world takes place on a moon, like I said. So there's physical reality that makes up. So there's people that are not part of the game that just work on the game, like construct sets basically, like a theme park, which is kind of weird.
In fact, I think they actually call it the playground. It's introduced as the playground.
Yes, and then you have the avatars, which are the actual player characters, which are through science fiction magic connected instantly to someone else's brain somewhere in the world who has an account in the game, are created with instant matter. So this is the sort of weird thing that I would love to know more about, where it's kind of like a hard light hologram, but it has like a little bit of stuffness to it, but it's supposed to be like really light and like really susceptible to water. So it's saying like when you like fall into the water, well, it's just the game reason of you fall into water and then you suddenly just appear back on land because your instant matter body dissolved and then is just remade real quickly. It's just sort of like a hand wave where like why things are happening. But then there's more questions that arise from that.
And the game's really meta about it too. Like, characters will talk about it, they'll stand there staring at water, wondering why is water so dangerous to them. They do a lot of, hanging the lantern on their own caveats and special world-building nuances. But there's also some fun sort of meta story that they get to use. Like, the whole excuse of this whole playground is like, there's an alien world with actual alien artifacts that they need to do stuff with and they don't understand. And like, well, what if we just crowdsource it? So this whole MMO is like a crowdsourced attempt to understand alien technology by getting gamers to do stuff for them.
Mm-hmm. Which, hey, that actually happens in reality sometimes. In real reality, the one we're speaking from, with like the folding at home stuff for like the PlayStation, and there's actually other websites and stuff that'll do
folding at home, Galaxy Zoo, there's Stardust for the Stardust mission. There's a lot of them.
I guess there's Bitcoin mining,
but that doesn't actually help.
It doesn't help anyone. I think there's a website. I forget the name of the website. It's just like a database of like number sequences and like different prime types, and you can just use your computer to calculate weird types of prime numbers. Just if you're into that kind of thing. I'm not saying I am, but I'm at least I was made aware of it as I was watching a number file video on it. We have a new party member! Yay! It's
and actually that's an appropriate Citron, I think, and it's an appropriate segue, as he's the beautifully nerdy. I love his random biology facts that he just everything you kill. He's like, this is not biology. Has to tell you why it's not biology.
Yep. He's like, this doesn't make sense at all. It's when you go through like the wintry area, there's like penguins don't live on mountains, and it's just like it doesn't. It's fine. It's just a video game.
But
It's like, why is there a lake, and then underneath the lake is a river?
I think they'll actually tell us about that in a little bit. But that's one of the great things about the characters. Like, they all have quirks, they all have obsessions, not just in the normal, roll a 1d6, get a character quirk sort of way. They all have things they actually talk about. It comes up all the time, like right there.
Can't have a desert by the scorpions.
Yeah.
And these are the like little Y prompts, or they'll just happen in the corner, and you can advance them or not as you're kind of going around attacking things.
And even if you miss them, you can always the start menu, one of the 3 menus in the game. Small negative L games, Q2 menus. But that one you can always go back and look at the conversation. It's quite happy to see. Not only do you see the replay of the conversations, they animate the little facial animations too as you scroll through, so you don't miss a lot of the really fun animation that they've invested in.
Yeah, that's really great when you go back and you just see Leia's nod. I'm doing it right now. You can't see this on the podcast, but it's sort of the podcast-like portion here. But okay, it's not technically a podcast, but for the actual fighting of the game, as you can see, this is the main way that you interact with the game. You can do dodge rolls. It's more of a dash. A dodge dash.
It's a dash.
You've got a shield. The shield can be, if you can hit things right at the right moment. You get parries. You have long-range attacks, which you can charge up. You have close-range attacks, which have little simple combos. And then each one of them has a sort of special ability that can be tied to it based on the skill tree. And then after that, you can also apply elements on top of them. So there's layers and layers and layers and layers. You mentioned that there's a lot of menus.
Yes,
this is true. Currently, this is just an overview of like the sort of the plants of the area. One of the sort of main collectathon quests of the game is just attacking a lot of plants in order to learn about them more betterly.
and not just, and this actually I think is one of the things, and you see it here too. Like, they've got a very 3D map, and you start to learn how to get up and down and explore all around. And there's always regular plants, boring plants, like the regular cactuses you see here. There will always be like rare plants in each area, and hide them in really clever places. And it's one of those great little. It's not a collectible quest, but still, hey, there's a flowering cactus over there. I'm gonna find it and shoot it. Why? Because it's a flowering cactus.
Because I have to. It took me an embarrassing long amount of time to realize that I could just shoot the plant. Because I was just like, well, it's way over there. How do I get over there? And then I spent like 30 minutes trying to find like the right things to jump on. And I was like, oh, right. If I shoot something, it just warps to me. I don't actually have to stand next to it.
Did you play a melee more focused? Because you can play this game very melee focused or very ranged focused.
I'd say that my personal style is lots and lots of just melee combos. That's my preferred method. So that would that maybe goes towards explaining why I was not considering my long range options. Like in Legend of Zelda, I guess more of an Ocarina of Time thing. Jumps, there's no jump button that's sort of dedicated. It's just automatically when you walk off of ledges. This game is there's a lot of combat in the game, but I'd say that probably one of the main things is the puzzles. There's a lot of puzzles in the game, which actually
there are a lot of puzzles.
I really enjoy them a lot. I think that maybe the dungeons are too long. I think that maybe if there was slightly more dungeons, but they were not quite as long. It also has a Zelda-like effect of you get the new thing halfway through the dungeon, so that the other half of the dungeon you can use the new thing that you got to do more puzzles. So it's like, okay, I appreciate that as a general design. But maybe if those were split up, abstractly speaking, if the first and second halves were just different types.
And even within like half a dungeon, because I definitely know the same thing. Doing the fire dungeon. Well, fire dungeon is an interesting question. Which one's the fire dungeon? Which one's the cold dungeon?
Mm-hmm. They both feature both.
But I counted 20 different new mechanics that were introduced in just the dungeon. Some of these are really small, subtle ones, but just like. There are so many new concepts that were just introduced in the dungeon. It almost gets a bit of fatigue because you come in a new room and you're like, great, I have to figure out an entirely new mechanic and then solve an introductory puzzle and then a more advanced puzzle. And of course,
and then like the combat puzzle version of it, where you did it once. Now you did it with the thing that you learned in the previous room, and now do it while fighting off an enemy.
And then right before the final boss, because there's always a boss, but there's also always a boss puzzle. It's like all the mechanics, just one final exam. They're really cool, actually. Some of the mechanics of those final puzzles get to be really cool, but they're a bit predictable to know that they're there, and just sometimes you look back and say, oh wow, that was a lot of mechanics to have.
Yeah, there's a lot. I appreciate the variety of the puzzles in this game. It's actually very interesting, aside from a little bit of fatigue if you're trying to go through the whole thing all at once. I'd recommend maybe just breaking up the dungeon into different sessions, just for sanity's sake.
Though, one of my favorite sets of puzzles, actually ones you're seeing a little bit out here, are just the exploring the open world. They've done a lot of intricate level design, like weaving vertical paths and secret paths that unlock other paths and unlock other paths that eventually get you to one of those wonderful little treasure crates that seem underwhelming at first, but become like the bread and butter of your overworld exploration. Because you see what you have to figure out how to get to it.
Yes, I do like that. There's a certain formulaicness to the overworld maps of what we're in right now, where you can see right there the sort of like second level objects. Clearly there's a jump to this, to this, to that, jump over the long thing, jump down here, jump. So you have to kind of trace it back to figure out where you start. The only thing that I'd say is frustrating with this is that you're doing a lot of jumping, and there's nothing worse than just missing one of the last jumps. It just sucks.
It does.
It's very, very frustrating, especially since a lot of times there will be shortcuts, which is good. So they'll be like, you step on a button, the thing comes down, so that you don't have to repeat something if you just miss one jump at the end. But that is not always the case. So like it's just something that you get better at as you go along. But even inside dungeons and stuff, lots and lots of jumping required. I can't fit through there.
It's pretty forgiving. It's not like super like it's a 2D game. It's not like super precise platforming, but still you will miss and you will fall and you'll have to walk back, and you'll do that 2 or 3 times.
I forgot the name of the species, but yes, this guy is very excited, super excited. Is it the shad? I think it's the shad.
It's the shad.
Okay, yeah.
Which you can never figure out if they were birds or lizards.
I want to say lizards. I think there's lizard people.
I can't think of feathers.
I mean, reptiles can have feathers. Just think of it it's like a classic dinosaur. Yes, this is the dungeon for this. Well, not this zone, but for this video, anyways. Citron is going on about underwater lakes. It doesn't make any sense.
Pressures and
that smug expression is so good. Just like it's fine. Don't worry, guys. Like, is it? But then yes, some of the questions arise. Is like, is this real water? Or is this the fake water? If it's the fake water, why would it affect our avatars? Because only the real water affects the avatar. Anyways, that's fine. I have spent a lot of time in this game pressing the back button and thinking that the map would come up, but that is not that's not how you get to the map. If I were to just a narrow criticism, what the back button or the select button or whatever that is, it should just bring up a map if you're using a controller. I just feel like that's something that should just happen.
And that was there's the 3 menus, and you can't get between them. So if you use the inventory menu and manage your inventory and realize you want to travel somewhere, you can't get to the map from the inventory. You have to go back to the normal game and then hit the radio menu to get to the map. Which the radio menu is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Which is where the map is. So it's like radio menu, and then on the right, and then there's your map. Really, even now, I constantly press the back button thinking the map will come up, just because I've been trained with other games that would be the case. But no, that is not the case. I'd say if I had another minor criticism with the way that the flow of combat goes in this game, it would be with some of the puzzle elements well, as an example, there's an enemy that's called a virus, which is not in this part of the game, but happens later on, that I had to look up how to fight because I had no idea what was happening and why, and they just kept duplicating, and then more of them would show up, and then I would attack them with an element, and then it would break them, but then they'd be invincible, but then there'd be a line connecting them, so I was like, okay, I can understand that there's a connection here. So I was like, do I have to break the ones that, so like, okay, if I break the ones that are spawned, then do I have to like put like extra energy into them so that like goes down the dotted line to like break the one that made them? Or do I have to break 3 or 4 of them at the same time so that there's a bunch of tethers? And then no, it's not the case. It's none of those things.
I mean, I'm really torn because I love the break system in this game. Almost every monster, every creature you fight has a break condition. And once you don't have to learn them, like you can brute force almost every fight in the game. Not all, but most brute fights you can brute force. But once you learn how to break an enemy, and sometimes there's a cow that charges, you can get them to charge into a wall, and then they're broken, and you can attack them for massive damage. Mm-hmm. It feels really good, but they're not always great at communicating it. I'm torn because sometimes it means you've learned like the secret weakness of the enemy, but sometimes you get to that fight where it's like, I know there's a secret here, but I just can't figure it out.
For those wondering, the thing that you have to do with the viruses is that when they spawn a new one and they break, they're invincible, but they become a bomb that if you hit them towards the thing that spawned them, they will explode and break the thing that spawned them. And that had happened just randomly sometimes, so it was, well, also, when there's a lot of enemies on screen, it's hard to tell exactly which thing is causing which thing to happen. So there was not a lot of like feedback that I was getting, because I mean I was like, obviously there was a connection here. It says this is a virus, the thing that you create is an antivirus. I was like, okay, yes, I understand that there is going to be, the antivirus is going to somehow attack the virus, but then what do I do next? There's a boss. You can tell it has 2 phases because it has 2 pips on its life bar.
This is very much a school of, next round, same as the first, but harder, faster, and more special moves.
Mm-hmm. The little Y, the Y prompts for the in battle dialogue is another thing that can be a little frustrating because there's a lot of dodging and special effects and explosions and trying to break and trying to get elements out, and I want to read the story that's happening, so. A lot of times I will, you just have to kind of choose one or the other. Maybe if I was better at the game, I could read the dialogue while also doing all these things, but this is just a minor point.
I mean, in many ways, that's the story of the game. There are so many layers added, and like, as you can see, even your party members all have their own special moves, they call out their own special names, and I barely remember any. One of them's a joke, like Falcon Punch, and I love them, and I wish I actually knew all of my, co-companion special moves and how to use, how to synchronize it. But there's so much going on, so much information, so much depth. And even though this is a kinder, friendlier RPG than almost any I've played in a while, there's just so much there.
Oh, I got that good break. Feels good. Just charge it up. Just spam. All right, spam and victory. We have defeated the lava worm mountain volcano thing. Another minor criticism about the battle system is that the long-range enemies in the game tend to be difficult because they auto-dodge, which I find extremely frustrating. So, just like those freaking headphone rats. You're just like, you shoot them and they disappear. Or you try and hit them and they disappear because they just auto-dodge your attacks until they're trying to do an attack. Then you can only do a long-range attack to hit them. It's just like...
The fights are often... there are a lot of enemies that are basically immune to the damage in the front, or basically immune to damage in the back, or basically immune to damage or they flit around and you can't...
Yeah, some of the bird things that just kind of go off into... Because, I mean, there's a 3D element of the game because, you can be higher or lower than a thing, but it's still 2D, so you can't really do anything about it until they decide to be in the plane that you can actually attack. So, Also, there's PvP in the game, so it's just storyline-wise, and it's kind of awful, and I don't like that at all. There's a character that constantly tries to player versus player you.
I love the character. I love his excuse.
Yeah, his excuse is fine. He's well, I mean, you play the game and kind of like
you'll meet him pretty quickly.
Yeah, he shows up repeatedly, and every time I was just like, I wanted the option to just be like, no, that's okay, but thou must.
Well, thankfully you can lose the PvP to no penalty other than your own pride.
You can lose, but also you have to win. Fortunately, you can just use the shield power-up and then mash combos. So, recommended. 2 thumbs up, shield power-up, because that particular type of that fight it's frustrating because of auto dodging, where you're just like, I'm gonna do a combo, but every time you try and do anything, it's not at the time in the fight where it is vulnerable, because the guy's basically only vulnerable after doing a combo chain. So it's just like constantly dodging around, and it's very frustrating at times. We got the shiny orb though. There's Emily. She had real life problems. She had a group assignment.
Homework. The bane of all MMOs.
It's another question I kind of wonder about the story, and the story of the game is, what is like the relative I guess like expense of CrossCode or Crossworlds, which is the game they're playing. Like, is it just a regular MMO that people just kind of pay a small amount monthly fee for, or is it extraordinarily expensive because it requires you to like quantumly entangle your consciousness across space to a moon?
They never really tell us. We meet a fair number of characters, but they're all just MMO players.
Yeah, they seem just like regular people. Just kind of like regular dudes that are playing video games with each other, and they have like, you know, students or, you know, real life or, you know, that kind of stuff. But I wonder what the like, is there like a caste system where there's only
free to play, or...
Yeah, is it free to play? Is there like is it more of a, I don't know. It seems like the technology would be very expensive to have. It's not just like requiring you to have an internet connection and like at least a last generation video card. It's like like the quantum entanglement device from basically have an Ansible in your room.
And they're actually like physically building the MMO. Like there's workers you'll meet that are not part of the MMO. Like, oh yeah, we're building this section today. It's like humor too.
Yeah, there's like this whole ecosystem, because like very theme park like, as if the theme park were itself the entire moon. Well, a moon. This is sort of like a sci-fi, the science fiction bent to it, where clearly there's multiple populated worlds. It's not really part of the main story. It's just kind of, it implies that if it's saying that this is a moon, it's like, okay, well clearly there would be other moons. It's not just like Earth's moon or something like that. Anyways, there's a lot of layers to the game. It's just so nice to play a game that is well written. It's been a while, to be honest.
and polished and lots of polish and layers of systems that you don't have to kill every plant. You don't have to collect every will. You
don't have to. Actually, I would actually recommend against doing a lot of the side quests, because they kind of burned me out on areas because there's way too many of them usually, and there are different tiers of side quests. There's the ones that are interesting in that they have like a unique twist on gameplay and their own sort of side area that you go to. But then there's the ones that are just, collect 5 of this, fight this monster at this time. Those basically just, it's fine. I've played video games before. I've played RPGs before. I've done plenty of those kinds of things. It's just hard to tell sometimes whether or not the end of it will be like, oh, here is a genre, like a different genre briefly of video game. Yeah, here's a tower defense game for some reason at the end of this quest. That's cool. But then sometimes it'll be like, oh, it's okay. I collected a bunch of ice, and it's like, thank you for the ice. Here's ice
really
cream.
And now you can buy ice cream. But it really is hard to tell because some of the quests start off really boring, and they chain too. Like you do a quest chain. The first quest is collecting X of food, and then you can destroy quests with mechanics.
Yeah, it's good times. I'm still playing the game. I'm very excited to keep doing this. At least right now, we're recording it before Thanksgiving. I'm looking forward to playing it over like the sort of Christmas break and just kind of.
How many hours in are you?
Actually, let me check the old. Steam will let me know. Let's see, library. That is how you pronounce that word, library. Let's see, where is CrossCode? I'm 21 hours in so far.
I'm 31 hours in, and they just announced I'm in the end game. And I really appreciate a game where a character actually turns and says, "Welcome to the end game." It's useful to know. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, very nice, very nice. There's an obvious structure to the game because of the 4 elemental temples, but there's also plenty of twists and turns, revelations about Leah and her origins and what her deal is, and the people that work on the game, the workers that work on the game, the real life people that play the game, the sort of fantasy story inside the science fiction story. So it's just a beautiful, like, it's an onion. A delicious RPG onion.
And for another layer, it's a game under active development. Like the developers are promising new features, and they have this wonderful mechanic in game where they can talk about patches in game. Because like NPCs can say, "Welcome to this feature that was introduced in this patch number. Do you need introduction on it?" And you're like, "Oh, that actually was introduced in that patch number."
Like, oh yeah.
So I've already run across several mechanics where they clearly introduced it in the patch, and there's areas that they have little workers standing outside saying, "Don't worry, we're going to add this area later." I'm very interested in what they add there.
Yeah, this solves the problem that I have with a lot of. Go on a side rant here. Just for a moment here about modern retro video games. A lot of them rely heavily on fourth wall breaking, just meta commentary on the things that they're aping, or like The Messenger, which I also recommended on this channel because it's actually a pretty fun game. It has what I would say the bad version of that, where it has like a character talking about like, "Oh, you can't get through the next area yet because I haven't given you your power up." It's like, okay, cool, nice, I guess. And like this power up is called like the rope shot, but everyone will just call it a grappling hook. I'm like, okay, this is not the good kind of self-reference. This is the bad kind, where it's just like, kind of like I just facepalm and like, yes, okay, yes, video games, cool. But this game solves that by turning references to gameplay elements into world building, which is so much better. So you can have people in the game talking about the game, and on a meta level, they can also be talking about the experience of playing the game as you, the player, are doing. But it has the literal meaning of people in the game discussing the game itself. So then you get an idea of how the people in the world relate to one another, how they relate to the game, and it just expands the world and makes it all the more cohesive, which I appreciate a lot.
If I can take that, one of my favorite moments, it's just before the Fire Temple, before you go into what I call it. There's all the
Vajro Temple?
I can't. But all the other players are sitting outside talking and listening to their conversation. And they do this in every temple before and after. It's like you're doing dungeons with these random hobos from the game. They're always the same hobos. You get to know them. They're kind of like acquaintances, but not really. And
there's the one that always sits on tables.
There's the one that's afraid of heights. There's the two that always run around. But there's one character that he's doing like a ready check. Do you have your consumables? Have you bought the latest gear? And then one of the characters is like, "Well, no, I really like this weapon that I got that we all as players probably got, that we all held on to for way too long.
It has health regen on it."
And there's this really meta moment where he's like, "Yeah, no, it's hurting you more than it's helping you. Please go buy a real weapon." And then sitting here, I'm like, "Yeah, I need to go do that too."
It's like, oh, I'm using that. It's talking about me. I did not change at that moment, but I was using the health regen item for a long time because health regen seems like it'd be very good.
It is really good.
It is very good, but you only health regen in the context of a string of battles, because in this game you just fully restore your health if you're out of combat. So after realizing that, I was like, okay, well, if it's a really long fight, it could be useful. But I could also just use consumables, and I guess this other weapon does 20% extra melee damage, so that's probably good, I guess.
No one wants to use consumables.
No, I use so few of them in this game. I have so many sandwiches. I have so many virtual sandwiches. Are they real sandwiches? Or are they virtual sandwiches?
They've resolved that one. They're virtual sandwiches because
Okay.
we can't eat. Oh, players in the game
players in the
can't
game eat them, so they're just more instant matter. Okay,
It's a
that
character
makes sense.
staring at a tree longingly saying, I wish I could eat the real tree for food. I can't.
Existential crisis. Well, that's CrossCode. If you enjoyed this video content, feel free to support us on Patreon. Link is in the description. Also, if you would like to just send like a one-time tip, we have a PayPal address that you can send stuff to. And then, of course, there is the YouTube stuff like commenting and subscribing, which is also helpful. Comments are great because I like reading comments. And in a shocking twist, the comments on our YouTube channel are mostly civil and positive. One of them is like, good job, and tell David that I hope he feels better. I was like, oh, that's so nice. I didn't ever think that I would, so I'm like texting David. I was like, oh, and make sure to read the new YouTube comment because it's positive. And I'm like, no one has ever put that sentence together without, and meant it literally and not in an ironic way. It's like, huh, that's very nice. Anyways, CrossCode.